Hmm.
And then is
Hi, everybody. Oh,
everybody's gonna jump on?
everybody's on, Diana. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the
11
CCA
people.
living room. It's great to have you back here. I'm Jason Silverman, and helping program the living room. We've had a wonderful time these first 8 months of uh, pandemic, bringing you these programs. We're glad that we can connect Santa Fe with some inspiration and some meaning during this difficult time. I hope you're all being safe. Thank you for being safe. Thank you for taking care of your neighbors. Um, it's an especially difficult time in New Mexico right now, and with the cold weather, there are a lot of people in need. Um, those of you who are on this particular Zoom probably are doing what you can to take care of each other. We do appreciate you sending resources to local social services organizations. And the CCA also is a not for profit organization like all arts organizations. We are weathering this storm. We want to be here when the pandemic is done to help do the repair and the healing that will be necessary. So if you have the inclination, please donate to the CCA. I'll put the link into chat once we get going here. The film is The Antidote. I've been crying ever since I saw it, so I'm just staying hydrated. Uh, and it was suggested to us from our dear friend Diana Taylor, who is herself one of America's most renowned cinematographers and directors. We're really grateful to have her as part of our family. You guys all know Diana by now, but her go to Internet Movie Database and look up her incredibly impressive filmography. She is going to introduce the panelists today. Diana, thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of this today.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm just going to ask everyone to support CCA if you can. Even a little bit helps right now because we're trying so hard to stay alive during the pandemic. I call it the COVIDius. It's a horrible thing. But I'd like to introduce who's here. So we have Kahane Cooperman and John Hoffman, who shared the director and producer credits for this film, and who are extraordinary in their own rights. And I'm going to read a little bit about Kahane first. Award-winning documentary filmmaker and television producer. Her documentary, Joe's Violin, was nominated for the 2016 Academy Award. For 18 years, she had an integral role on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, where she was co-executive producer from 2005 to 2015. And her work on The Daily Show received 11 Emmys and 3 Peabodys. I'm going to keep these short. But she's incredible. She's making documentaries as we speak. She's remarkable. I'm thrilled that I finally got to meet her in this way. And John Hoffman, who I've known for 30 years, I will say, and we've worked together on many of his absolutely visionary projects. I will say he's a 6-time Emmy award-winning filmmaker, whose films have premiered on Sundance, the New York Film Festival, and on Netflix. And much of his work as a filmmaker has focused on key health issues of our time. And I've worked with him on some of those. Weight of the Nation for HBO, Addiction for HBO, Alzheimer's Project for HBO, The First Inhuman for the Discovery Channel, which is really interesting, a 6-hour series set in the world's largest research hospital, the NIH's Building 10. And I'm curious as to what they're doing with the pandemic, frankly. And he was executive vice president of documentaries and specials for Discovery Channel from 2015 to 2018. And after nearly two decades of being the vice president of documentary programming at HBO. And I believe John is making a film right now. Can I say what it is? I'm not allowed to say what it is. I will not say. It's going to be a great, you'll all be thrilled when it, okay, I'm glad I asked. It's an amazing film, very, very relevant to the time we're in right now. Okay, now you're also going to see April Miller, who's in the glasses right here, who was the founder and is now the executive director of the Sky Center. She found, and she's in Santa Fe. The Sky Center is here in Santa Fe. She believes strongly that the suicidal behavior in youth and the development of protective factors for youth at risk is really critical. And so she formed the Sky Center in order to introduce that idea. And do you want to say something about it really briefly? We brought April in because I wanted to have, and actually at John and Kahane's suggestion, someone local who's doing similar work than what you see in the film. And April, I just wanted to hear from you how the critical things that you were just saying to me about it.
I would say the one thing that happened when we opened the Sky Center 25 years ago is that for me, youth suicide is a community issue, and it's often identified as an individual issue, like there is something wrong with that kid or that family. And I really see it as a community issue. Why would the young people in our community want to die when they are moving into the most blossoming period of their life? So every program that we have at the Sky Center is really focused around our language as well, the antidotes to suicide, which are about forming social connections, learning how to regulate your mood, how to get in touch with nature, a whole bunch of stuff that's really based on, even though it's a behavioral health center, it's really based on love, kindness, and hope, and connecting people who care about kids who are thinking about ending their life. So we have a host of programs. We have a local problem. I see it as a local public health problem because New Mexico sits top of the nation for young people who want to die. So we really need to come together and form local solutions. So we're completely funded locally so that it can be free, easy access. I could go on, but that's the nutshell.
But you don't ask immigrants for your immigrant status, for instance. You ask none of those questions. Can you afford
We
this?
ask none of those questions other than if a dad calls up and says, I'm worried about my son, he's talked about suicide. What we want to say is, how does 4 o'clock sound? So that folks just can come right into the center and start meeting together with our graduate students and our supervisors. So we really want to get rid of all the barriers that make it, the hardest thing for me is the phone call, a dad calling up and saying, I'm worried about my son. The rest of it we want to have as wide open as possible. So we write grants, we have individual donations. That's how we keep things free, no cost, and very accessible.
Great. And Anaí, you were born and raised here in New Mexico, right? And you are fully bilingual, which is fantastic. And you are now the new development director, is that development coordinator for the Sky Center. And what brought you, you were at Highlands and you decided that this was a good program for you, and April clearly discovered you. What a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
You want to say anything about that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was in my first year at Highlands, and I had a teacher who was a part of the Sky Center. She's the supervisor. And at first I was not too excited. I didn't really think that the Sky Center is what I wanted to do or be there. And then by the end, I really wanted it. And I wanted to get in and I wanted to be part of the program. And after being an intern graduate student with the Sky Center for a year, I didn't want to leave. And so that's why I'm still here with the Sky Center team as the development coordinator. And I believe in their mission. And I was born and raised here in Santa Fe, and I see the importance of helping our community, and I see how Sky Center really does that. And so that's why I really wanted to stick around.
So I wanted to introduce the two of them first so that you had a context, you and the audience have a context for something in Santa Fe that's doing similar kinds of work, and so that the conversation can flow between all of you. But now I'm going to go to John and say, you and your visionary ideas, you're always way ahead of the curve. In my whole history with you, you've been ahead of the curve. And I remember you saying to me, I don't know, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, Di, I really want to make a film about kindness. I think it was 2 years ago. I really want to make a film about kindness. And it was like, yeah, great idea. I'm totally with it. But, you know, but it's not exactly what people have expected recently. And yet it's one of the most critical things that we need to be thinking about and that we've seemed to have lost. So John, how did it come about for you? And Kahane, chime in. I mean, all, you know, chime in, of course.
Well, I I had come off of making Rancher Farmer Fisherman, which is about unexpected heartland conservationists, the ranchers, farmers, and fishermen who are doing very consequential work in red state America to conserve the environments that they work. And it was sort of a look at unexpected people who are solving very critical problems. And then after that, I made a film called Out of Many One, which is about the people in New York who are using the arts to teach immigrants who are seeking citizenship what they need to know to pass the citizenship exam. So in my work, I try to find unexpected solutions to complex problems. It's always been the focus of my work. And I just felt, and it was longer than that, it was about 3 years ago, I felt that this hate that was growing in the country, this divisiveness that was so disturbing, I felt like there was something in the work that I was doing of these unexpected voices. And I said, I want to look, well, hate and what was happening with Trump was so much the bright, shiny object that everyone was focusing on. What happens if we look over here at the forces that are making our communities good? At the same time that there are serious problems. And that's how it began. I was very fortunate to have the support in some of the public health work that I was doing from a very large healthcare nonprofit, Dignity Health. And in a meeting with their CEO, and they have a motto that guides their work, which is Hello Human Kindness. And I had started talking to them about how serious that work is. And I just made an offhand remark, would you ever consider making a film about kindness? And they said, we should talk about that. And it quickly moved. And they gave enough resources to get this film started, but it was significant resources, but for one word, kindness. There was no concept at all. And I knew that I wanted to make this film with somebody. I knew that the sort of intellectual challenge of what do you do and how do you make something that's a serious film and a film of these times. And I started talking to lots of filmmakers. And Dawn Porter and Fisher Stevens both said, you got to talk to Kahani Kapoor. Do you know Kahani? You got to talk to Kahani Kapoor. And so I called up Kahani, or I emailed her, I can't remember. And she responded and I said, let's have breakfast. And it was like the next day practically that we had breakfast. And we started a conversation. And, Kahani, you'll tell everyone why, you wanted to have that breakfast.
Sure. Well, I was hungry. No, but I was, but not just for the breakfast. It was 2018, and I was, I think, like so many other people in this country, like very concerned. There's this feeling of civility crumbling beneath me. I didn't understand this feeling. I didn't recognize it as the place, where I grew up on a kind of a day-to-day basis. And so, when John said, I have some money and one word, kindness, I thought, well, what an interesting time to explore, and what an important time to explore that aspect of human nature and of how we function with that. So I said yes. And, we kind of together looked at this giant blank slate of what do we do? How do we portray this? And what do we need it to be about? We knew we wanted to push back against sort of kindness has a very perception of being soft and sweet. And we knew we wanted to push back against that common perception and look at it more as like a tool, almost weapon of change, something that can be fierce. so that's something that we kind of did know out of the gate. But do you tell that with one story? Do you tell that with many stories at this time in the story of this country? You know, what do you do? So we started together to try to figure that out. And we started, you know, reading everything and speaking with, I mean, just experts and evolutionary biologists and poets and philosophers and, you know, just all kinds of people from every discipline, and reading everything we could. And our heads were just going, oh, we were getting so overwhelmed. And, you know, the one thing we knew for sure is that we probably couldn't find one story to explore this. We would probably want to do multiple stories. So I'm going to pass the baton back to John for a second. You know, we did get to a point where we felt like we've kind of reached the saturation point of our research and development in terms of what, you know, what is this about humans, that what are humans capable of in this arena. And we decided that to make our film, it was great to know all that stuff, but we needed to push it aside and really look at what moves people, which is emotion and stories. So I'll let John sort of take it from there about what we did next to figure out how do we find these stories.
So we had a small team at this point of another producer and an associate producer, and we were here in this house on a little mini retreat, and we just said, like, let's just push all this thought that we had been steeping ourselves in aside, and we did this visioning exercise where we said, like, let's project forward to the film is done and it's out in the world, and are there questions that we can ask now that we want the film to answer? Like, when the film is done, it's out in the world, what will we have answered? And we came up with 6 questions. They came relatively quickly, and they're very simple. They're, how do we raise our children? How do we teach our children? How do we take care of the sick and the dying? How do we live and work together? How do we welcome the stranger? And how do we lead? And we wanted to make a film that, with these various stories that we would find, would cover the lifespan, that we would have stories that went from birth to death, and would also be about the worlds that we move through. And we figured those questions sort of do it. And so that organized all of our thinking. You know, it's like, okay, we want to look for people who are doing really fascinating, innovative work where kindness and compassion and empathy and goodness are at the heart of an organizational sort of philosophy for everything from how do we raise our children, teach our children, how do we take care of the sick and the dying? And it really gave us a very, very organized, you know, thinking.
Okay, go ahead. And I'm going to say something.
Well, what happened, but there was, I want to just say, and I want to bring Tahani back in the conversation, because it's something very critical happened in the world. We thought we were like, had our sense of mission, but right in the middle of our sort of story research, there was a really unfortunate event in this country. Tahani.
Okay, so I'll make it fast because Diana, I know you have something you'd like to say, but
make a comment. But yeah, go ahead.
Right, but we had these 6 questions which were helping guide us towards stories. But Charlottesville happened, and it was, you know, a real moment of reckoning for many Americans and for us as well. And it's not that we were naive and unaware that there are some incredible injustices and systematic injustices in this country, but that if our film didn't acknowledge them, that we would only really be telling part of this story. So, so we really realized that it wasn't enough to have those 6 questions. And together we identified these fundamental unkindnesses. It's fundamentally unkind to not earn a living wage. It's fundamentally unkind to not have access to a safe place to sleep. It's fundamentally unkind. I always lose one. It's fundamental
Healthcare.
to not have, of course, to not have access to healthcare, and that racism is fundamentally unkind, homophobia is fundamentally unkind, sexism is fundamentally unkind. And we took those unkindnesses and we, you know, grouped them with these questions. And it was together that they all became the lens through which we started looking for ourselves. We knew each story, not that we were doing one-to-one, but that each story needed to address both the questions and the unkindnesses that so many Americans live with every day.
So that's for people who watched. You can now understand sort of the sort of reverse engineering as you think about the film, that every single story are people who are doing, you know, intentional work to lift others up in the face of these fundamental unkindnesses.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I want to just remind the audience that they can go into the Q&A and ask questions, which I'll be asking periodically. I'll be bringing your questions to the filmmakers and to April and Anaï as they come. You know, for me, I wonder, this film is about exceptional people doing exceptional things. And why is it that we see this as exceptional instead of the status quo, the norm? I was so struck by that this film is amazing because these things seem exceptional to us. I just was curious if anybody can answer that at this point. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that we actually describe the people in our film as everyday people. I do think what they're doing is exceptional, but they're everyday people. And one creative choice we made in this film, when you watch it, you never learn names or the names of organizations throughout the film. And there's a reason that is that way, because we wanted to make sure we were making a film where everyone who's watching it sees themselves somewhere in this film. Mm-hmm. And when you give people's names and titles and associations with organizations, it puts a barrier between you, the viewer, and the person who's experiencing the film and the story, and the person who's like, oh, well, that person's a doctor. I can't do that. I'm not a doctor, because it's not about their titles, and it's about the decision that this human being on the planet made to, as John said, intentionally do something that lifts other people up. And that's really like the common thread. So I just wanted to make that comment, that I do see them as everyday people.
Yes, and I love that there weren't specialists or religious leaders speaking about kindness from their high places.
Yeah, there are everyday people are the experts.
Yes, I love that part about it. It was so relatable and just accessible to all of us to be inspired by. The fact that exact thing that you said, Kahana, was really inspiring. I mean, we find that at the Sky Center, we often end up with a grandpa who's never been asked what his concerns are for his grandson. And all of a sudden, on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, he is the hero of the moment, because he's talking to his grandson about what would happen to his life if his grandson hurt himself. And he's lifted up in just this really quiet moment, but it's absolutely transformative. And I would say, I don't think it's too much to say it's life-saving to hear these stories of people who love you, that somehow in the middle of daily family life, it doesn't get expressed. And when there's a crisis like youth suicide, people think they must run to the professionals. And one of the things that happens at the Sky Center is we start just inviting the family. And as John said, we've got a complicated problem. What can be the kind of extraordinary solution here? And it's often
Yeah.
just bringing in people who, in all my years of mental health, I believe that the love that people feel for each other is going to be basically the final glue that keeps people on the planet and keeps things sticking together. So I love that part about the film.
I again want to, well, John, you were going to say something. Do you want to?
No, go ahead, Di. I'm sure
gonna
there's
go
lots
ahead.
of ground you want to cover.
I
Hold
mean,
on.
I want to cover all of it. Each of the stories is so remarkable. I
Mhm.
absolutely was so moved by the simplest thing at the beginning, which is the 2 minutes of meditation for the children. What if we all had that instead of saying, yes, we've all got to say, the Pledge of Allegiance, but what if we had that idea starting so young? And what if we had the notion of all the world's religions starting almost that young? In simple terms, the differences of people, if we talked about diversity at that age. I know kids are in more and more diverse situations, but I still think there are camps of children and not necessarily a lot of mingling. And anyway, I couldn't believe it when I saw those kids just sitting there quietly. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. And baby Reuben, of course.
That was, I mean, finding roots of empathy and what that is for people who watch the film. They don't know that that is a program that started in Canada. It's all over the world. There's not that many schools in the US that have adopted it, but it's called Roots of Empathy. And it's a woman named Mary Gordon who had this insight that if you bring an infant in at the beginning of a school year and the infant comes once a month for the 9 months of the school year and the children see that child regularly, that the child becomes a way that they open up, and you see it in the film, they open up a conversation about emotions. The children learn how to talk about emotions. And so if baby Reuben had been crying that day that we filmed, the leader would have led the conversation about what do you think baby Reuben is upsetting baby Reuben. And so it's been a widely studied program, and it shows that it has lasting impact in terms of the development of the children who go through it. All the programs that are in the film, part of what made the cut is that they are extensively studied. The Modesto school system, which is the only school system in the entire country that has world religions as a requirement for graduation. That program was developed in close sort of consultation with the First Amendment Center. It's been studied by Stanford for its effectiveness. And so it gives us the comfort of, when we put a story out there in a film like this, that all of the people that people met in the film are doing this really important work, and that it's been backed up by a lot of research.
Fantastic. I was also, in Amarillo, right? I've been through Amarillo many times. I've driven through there many times. It's, you head into Texas from New Mexico, from Santa Fe, and on I-40, and there you are in Amarillo. And who would know that Russell, for instance, who's so extraordinary, the biggest issue holding a student back is not the classroom, he says, but what happens outside the classroom. And this whole notion that, you can fix the short-term obstacles for long-term success. Those examples were so poignant too. And the ARC, I think it's called, is the program.
Mhm.
And how do you find the ARC? And I the woman who, the veteran who couldn't pay her car payments and it was stopping her from continuing. And the single mother who's struggling by working at night and so forth, Alicia, these things should not be happening. So how did you find that program, and what was it like being there? Connie, were you there on a lot of these shoots? Were both of you there? How did?
Yeah. We were both on almost all the shoots. If not together, then it was one of us. But so with Amarillo, we originally, read about Russell Lowry Hart, the president of Amarillo College, which is a community college in the town of Amarillo. in the Atlantic magazine. They did a profile on him because he is a very unusual kind of leader, and he had participated in a homeless simulation over the course of a bunch of days, because he had found out that this huge number of his students at his school were housing insecure. And he wanted to be able to understand what that feels like and what that means.
Yeah,
So
59% were housing insecure and
yeah,
54% were food insecure of his
yeah.
students.
And he couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So, you know, once he just, so that's what the article sort of starts with, but then it gets into how he has changed the culture of his school and really the whole community of Amarillo to support these students, because the ripple effect of supporting these students, who are mostly first generation college students, get that degree, get a potential living wage job afterwards, or move on to a four-year program, changes the whole outlook for the whole community economically, not just individually for these students and their families. And I mean, I think the most remarkable thing is that he learned all this by talking to students, by listening to them. You know, we film him going around campus, like trading lunch for a few minutes with students to hear, like, what's going on in your life, what's going on here. And when, you know, he did this enough and realizes that it wasn't academic barriers that was keeping these kids from graduating, was all these life barriers, transportation and utilities and rent and childcare and all of these things. And you know, beyond that, he said, you know, they were all these things that I thought were other people's responsibilities, always. But then I realized it was our responsibility. It was our college's responsibility. So he got buy-in from the staff and the professors and the teachers and the community, and everyone works together to help every single student get that degree, and the numbers have increased exponentially. And we follow what happens in this remarkable place on campus called the Arc, which you referred to. And there it's devised by Russell Lowry Hart. It's in the middle of campus with glass walls. So it's right there. And it's got 3 social workers who work in there, who are employed by the university, and students are in and out of there all day. And they come in and they talk and they say, this is what I'm having a problem with. And there's a food pantry in there. And those women in there, the social workers, make things happen and change lives of these students every day. And so we follow some of the students in that particular story of the film.
April, I'm curious, because of your suicide prevention work, I'm sure it wasn't lost on you that Alicia is speaking about her suicidal thoughts, that she could not care for her son, and she thought her son would be better off with her parents, and that yeah, she walked into the Arc as her own way. I mean, she knew that if she did not, you know, avail herself of some kind of, you know, sort of counseling, that she was going to drive off a cliff.
Yes.
So I'm curious, you know, how that impacted you, that scene.
I would say, John, that it brought up the word that we use a lot at the Sky Center was, wow, that was so courageous. Like, it took so much courage for her to reach out, because suicide is so lethal, because it's so isolating, because everyone who's thinking those kind of thoughts feel like they're alone, nobody else would understand. And she took that step outside of that, which obviously was so powerful, right? And so I really thought of that as how courageous that is, to sort of say, I need something beyond myself. I basically need my community. I need help. And, you know, I would say that, you know, one of the things that happens at the Sky Center is we see this, the impact of poverty and addiction and being marginalized and isolated, so that feeling suicidal becomes sort of a family feeling. That sometimes we've got a 15-year-old in the counseling session and dad starts saying, I want to die as well. And so I think a lot of what you were saying, John, is these are complex issues, because we see this running down through families, and now we've kind of turned to the family for How can we create solutions? We talk a lot about hope, like how do we generate hope? Especially with the pandemic, or the families that we've served have just been so impacted. They're all essential workers. They're scrubbing the hospital floors. They are over at the grocery market checking out. Their children are at home without good, stable internet, trying to do remote schooling. And we're trying to do this. One of our big antidotes is hope. How do we generate hope in situations like that? And it's very ordinary and remarkable all at the same time to start asking people, what inspires you? And that's why we're rarely alone in the room with a teenager, because their pot is empty in terms of hope. They need the inspiration of those who love them. And that's why we have these large family gatherings around a kiddo who is vulnerable in that way. Yeah.
I would just like to add for April and IE that the way you've been describing what you do, I think does have connections to a lot of our stories, and including Russell, but also specifically Diamond, who is our wonderful community organizer in Indianapolis with the bike shop story. He talks about two things: stories. He says stories are a philanthropic act. And the way you're describing these families coming in and a grandfather telling you, and you listening, both of you, listening, and I'm sure your staff, like listening to these families. And those are a narrative that you are hearing and being brought into. And because you are listening, I think you can do the work, that you do. So I just want to, commend you. And I think that's something that all of our stories and also what you're doing really have in common is that it's really about the stories that and sharing ourselves with each other, but also having people listen to them.
Well, Kahani, the other thing that Diamond says, which also just aligns so well with what April was saying, is that Diamond talks about finding people's gifts and talents, and that his philosophy of being a community organizer is not going out into the community and saying, what do you need fixed? How can I help you fix your problems? Because he found that just shuts people down. And what he discovered years ago is that it came because so many doors were basically closed on him as a man who was just going through his community on behalf of the Methodist church that he worked for. And he was in a woman's house, an elderly woman's house in the neighborhood, and she served him a piece of pie. And he was overwhelmed by how good the pie was. And he asked her about her pie making. And he said, can you make these pies and sell them? And she said, okay, sure. And then he was in another elderly woman's backyard, her vegetable garden in the backyard, and he was blown away. He didn't know that garden was there. And he said, if I bring some teenagers here, who could help you, could you teach them about gardening? And it turned his thinking around to how do you discover the gifts and talents of the people in your community and enable them with their gifts and talents rather than identifying what's wrong with the community and the problems. And he inverted his whole model of community organizing. And that's what you see in the film. That's what you see as he's walking with these three young women. He's discovering through conversation what all their gifts and talents are, and the gifts and talents of their mothers. And it's all very intentional work on his part. To how do you listen to people and how do you ask them what they have to offer the world rather than what's wrong with their world.
Yeah, I love one of the things I really learned from him is just that, where he was what it means when you ask someone, instead of asking somebody what do you need, you ask them what can you give. And it changes everything, including their sense of self-worth. And that was like just a personal wonderful takeaway for me with this film, of many. that changes how someone views themselves and their role in their community.
I'm
Just
interested in
simple.
Anai's involvement with April at the Sky Center, and that whole notion for Anai is, what can you give? Have you had that thought in the work that when you joined April in the Sky Center?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally for me, when I graduated in May, I was thinking about what was next and how I could be involved with the Sky Center. And I, now that you put that back, I think that it was the Sky Center and me thinking, what can I give? How can I be involved with the Sky Center to continue to give back to the community? And this wasn't, it wasn't clinical work. As a development coordinator, I'm doing something a little different with the Sky Center, but just as important, helping the Sky Center be viewed and helping us have a presence in the community and, have people recognize us in the community, basically. So that's just one thought. And something else that I wanted to add too, when I was watching the film, I was trying to think, well, how is Sky Center doing this? And how are we doing something similar and showing kindness? And something that really stood out to me was just the importance of showing up, the importance of being there, and how, like you were saying, just listening, the power that really truly has. I thought of a few families that I had last year where sometimes there was a few minutes of silence and maybe 10 minutes of silence where I wouldn't say anything and the family wouldn't say anything. And how powerful that was to the teenager and to the mom to just have someone willing to sit there with you for 10 minutes in silence. And how powerful that truly was. After a few sessions, child started opening up and started talking about what, the feelings, the anger, the sadness, and how powerful that really was. And then for the family to show up. April has given, I think, a few examples. I personally, as an intern, graduate intern, had a family. Second session, the teenager showed up with her mom, her dad, I think 3 or 4 siblings, a friend of hers from school, the stepdad, the stepmom, everyone had shown up. And they showed up and said, we care about you. And if you died by suicide, this is what I would feel. Her little 9-year-old sister started crying. And it was, I still get chills. This was over a year ago and I still get chills. And it was just the power of having someone show up for her and listen.
Yeah.
Listening equals kindness in many ways.
Yeah.
It's one of the most powerful things. It's one of the most powerful things is just being present. As you say, showing up.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to read one of these chat room comments here from Heidi. Thank you for your beautiful and important film. One thing it reinforced for me is the truth that the so-called giving of kindness isn't so much giving as it is the creation of relationship between everyone involved in the transaction. And with that in mind, what do you think people who normally work in the creative arts can do to reach out to others during this time of isolation when we cannot reach out to see each other in person? I thought that was great. And the creative arts is tricky, it's a little different than being on the street or helping wash feet or feed someone directly. Did you two do you have any, Kahane or John, have any thoughts about that?
Well, I'll take a stab in that. One of the things that I came away with the making of this film, another way of describing everyone's role that we portrayed. They're part of making their communities good. And so, this is, I think, one of our hopes in the way that we filmed, made this film, and this idea that we fly over and we drop in and we tell stories about who we just happened to, meet as we dropped into Hurleyville, New York, and this wonderful town. But there's an example of all these various forces, whether it's the fire department or it's the barbershop, these glimpses of what you see, but it's also the dance studio. There is this dance studio there in this town, and at the Center for Discovery, which is this remarkably well run and conceived center for differently abled young people. They are doing everything they can to discover the gifts and talents of all of these differently abled people, and using all the resources of their community to do that. So, you know, Sherma, who has this dance studio, is teaching all kinds of classes to the people in the community, whether they are, you know, abled or differently abled. And I think that, I mean, it's so, I hope that people were as moved as we are every time I watch, you know, Khadidra and Jeffrey, you know, dance in their wheelchairs. I still well up from it. And but it's all examples of how you make our communities good. All the forces that make, you know, these communities we live in, places that we want to stay in, places that we want to, you know, be involved in. And so the arts are part of what make a community good. You know, whether it's CCA that everybody here obviously has a relationship to, or all the other arts organizations, and living in a community that understands how important having them are. I mean, just that little town of Hurleyville, that dance studio, you know, it's a hub.
Mhm.
You see in the drone shot, I mean, there are about 5 buildings that make up that town, but you know, one of them is an arts center, and you know, we went to Hurleyville more than any other location in the making of this film, and you know, that arts center is buzzing in that tiny little town.
Mhm. Mhm.
Fantastic.
I appreciate that question so much, Diana, too, because just there's something that happens that when people feel like they know how to give and they can kind of participate in this collective movement of kindness, even if it's just in the everyday action of how you speak to the grocery clerk person. But it's pretty important to feel like I can play a piece, that I have a piece in this, that I have some power around that. I think that's a really important question that's been asked. What can I do? What can I do? I mean, it's important right now. Yeah.
That was my feeling about, are these exceptional? Is this so exceptional, or can we, even in the tiniest way,
Yeah.
begin to make those shifts so that it's always about listening a little longer, or giving someone some support in some small way, or saying hello at the checkout counter in a certain kind of way.
Yes.
Because at first I thought, well, these are all exceptional stories, and boy, I wish the world were like this. And then it
Mhm.
became more of a question of, how is it that we've gotten so alienated from our own kindness and from our own
Mhm.
gestures and from
Yes.
all of that? And of course, the media doesn't help, and what we seem to focus
Right.
on, the media doesn't help. And you know, the questions, it's really interesting. You know, Russell says a really interesting thing back in where is he? I had this wonderful, he said this wonderful thing. Where did he say it? He said, is the hate in this country, this is Russell at Amarillo. He said,
Mhm.
is the hate in this country to be our destruction or our clarion call? We must build bridges. It's deciding not about ignoring those destructive parts of our society, but that we shift our attention toward the good.
Mm.
And it is an intentional shift that we have to make.
Yes.
It's intentional every moment if we can. It's like a practice, if you will.
Yeah.
Anyway, I won't go any longer. I'm sure John and Kahani have something to say about that.
It is a
Well,
practice. Yeah.
it is a practice, and I think it's interesting, Diana, that you pointed out the 2 minutes of silence that we opened the film with in that 4th grade class, you know, because that's a practice too, that they're learning really young, you know. So I do think like it is something that you know, that you can, it's in you, you know, you just
Yes.
have to give it a moment to breathe sometimes in our busy lives, I think. I do think, you know, what John mentioned our drone shots, and we did want to give an impression, you know, that we're, you know, we go to we're weaving 9 stories from around the country together, and we're in all kinds of locations. We've mentioned some of them here. And the drone shots, which are part of what's in between our stories, to, you know, give the impression that we're kind of flying all over this country and dropping into these places. But I have to say, like, that I believe that, you know, and I really do believe that you could drop in. These are 9 locations that we happen to do our stories on, and I'll put a plug in for 4 additional really powerful stories on our website, which we'll tell you about. But I really think that you could drop in to any communities in this country. Like, we happen to drop into 9 of them, but you know, you could drop in anywhere, small towns, big cities, whatever it is. And I think you can find people like this doing things like this for other people. I really do. And we just don't focus on it. So I think, like, you have to ask, like, why don't we focus on that as a society?
I completely
Yeah.
agree. And I Jason has posted something he wants us to pay attention to. And I think it is, he is asking a question, which Kahani has heard me address this very point a number of times. And Jason, I'm gonna address your question by talking a little bit more about the Center for Discovery. One of the reasons I wanted to make that story is that these differently abled children and young adults, the care that they're getting is funded by New York State and our federal government. It's a healthcare provider that gets reimbursed for the care they're providing to these people. And so this is an example of, you know, a beneficent society that recognizes that these are young people that at another time we warehoused, we put them away, we discarded them as human beings. And now we have a different view over the past 30, 40 years. And we decided at some point that we're going to approach this in a different way. The Center for Discovery is doing it in a remarkably good way, how they use those public resources. It's remarkably well thought out program of how do you use those resources to lift these young people up and let them, as we say, as you learn in the film, find out what, you know, how can we make their lives as beautiful as possible. You see that. But it's not the individual. This is a big institution that employs 1,700 people. It's the largest center like this in New York State. And I was motivated to have the story in the film for that reason more than anything. I wanted people to understand that this is good government. This is a society that decides these are willful decisions of how we're going to treat each other as a society. So it's not overt. What I'm saying is not brought out in the film. It's not what the film's about. But I see that the film, I hope the film starts conversations like that about what kind of society do we live in, and, you know, what kind of society do we think we can be.
I'd just like to add another example to what John just talked about, is our story that takes place in Portland, Oregon, with our intergenerational community that's living together, that meets both the needs of kids in the foster care system and adopted out of the foster care system, and the elderly population. That compound of houses and community center that you see there, the city of Portland rents it to them for $1 a year their leases for 99 years. So that's an example of, you know, government seeing this as a solution to a huge problem for different groups, and they asking themselves, how can we help? And they make a decision to make it affordable. It's like, wow.
It's subsidized housing for the elderly. That the city provides subsidized housing for the elderly, for low-income elderly, and they provide subsidized housing for foster families. And so they just had this good government decision to put them together.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
a wonderful partnership. Yeah.
So what about you guys at the Sky Center? How do you have support from
Community. Yes.
Yeah,
Very much so,
community?
Kahana. I mean, our space is given to us by the Santa Fe Public School District because they can see the work we're doing. So we're in, a section of an older middle school that was underutilized, and we renovated it.
Oh,
The
that's
school board
great.
passed the renovation cost. So we have a lot of, the hospital sees our work and provides a grant for us so that when kids show up at the emergency room, they can do a warm handoff right into the Sky Center. So we have these sort of networks throughout Santa Fe, and we rely on individual donations and everything from the Rotary Club to the city to help us fund the work that we're doing in every way. I wanted to comment one thing that John was saying about kind of finding the talent and the ability and the gifts right in the community. And we have this incredible program where we're what we call champion kindness in the middle schools, and all the middle schools in Santa Fe. There are 7 of them, where a cross section of kids are peer selected. And all the criteria is they have the potential for leadership. So you've got, like, how middle school have those cliques, you got the smart kids, you got the sporty kids, you got the kids that are leading in a direction of not going to school and using substances and stuff, but they all have the leadership skill. And we bring them together for several days of retreat and start talking about what it's like to be gifted with that, and how can they influence things so that their small middle school can be a place of kindness. And so they get role playing around bullying and how to interrupt that. And they kind of step out of that. I can't tell you, like, in these shoes that are like twice their size, sort of, right? That they have been identified by their peers as leaders. They never would have thought. They might have been failing most of their classes even, right? But there is something about them that is identified by peers. So they just like swell up. And they take this mission, champion kindness in the middle school, interrupting bullying in the cafeteria. And it is unbelievable it's about 20 kids in each of our middle schools, what they're able to create. And, many of them are struggling with the very issues that they're trying to interrupt and solve. It's very kind of heart-opening program that we're running in the middle schools, trying to catch those kids when really young and calling them leaders, basically leaders of kindness. Yeah.
That's very powerful.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
Let's see. Susan Todd asked a question way up on top, which is, how is the Sky Center doing with COVID, and how are you handling the interactions? I mean, how are you supporting?
It's been hard. I mean, we did a hybrid model in September and October when things were a little bit better. So families that were struggling the most came into the center. All the COVID screening, social distancing, spending lots of money on air purifiers and all the protective gear. But I would say maybe November, when our numbers got so high in the town, we had to go completely remote. That is tough, right? We often have these 7 and 8-year-olds holding an iPhone and 7 family members over their shoulder, and people talking about family violence and addiction and all the tough stuff, while the phone is shaking up and down and the internet is not so good. So we are probably seeing around 75 families. Our Natural Helpers program is all on Zoom. The kids are, if you can imagine, remote learning, where our natural helpers are in English class and they notice someone looks sad and they start chatting with them on the chat bar. So we're running all of our programs right now remotely. We're hoping to get a little bit more back into the space if the numbers drop in town. Yeah. But it's been hard to balance staff and graduate student safety with service. We've been balancing that. We have essential need right now in our community to address the isolation that many of our families are feeling. Yeah, it's been challenging.
That's hard.
Yeah, it's been hard.
So I wanted to, before we go, and I don't know that we have to go yet, but you wanted to mention that you have 4 additional stories on your website. Is that right? Tell us about those, and I'd love everyone to be able to have a chance. You can just go to the website and see them. Is that right? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, you can go to, well, I see that Jason has put our website address in the chat, which is great. So you can go there, and not only are there can you learn about everything that all the individuals and organizations who we profile in the film, but you can also see 4 stories that we filmed that are just as powerful as the ones that are in the film. Just we couldn't make the film, any longer than it already was, and so we had to make some really hard choices for creative balance and everything. So there are 4 powerful stories that anyone can access and see in the form of short films on the website, in addition to learning about all the organizations. And also, we have a partnership with volunteermatch.org. So if you click on the Get Involved tab, you can you'll be taken to a kindness portal that's part of, the Antidote portal that's part of the volunteermatch.org's website, and you put in your zip code and your areas of interest, and it will tell you all the organizations where you are, where you could consider helping out in some way. I'm assuming many people here are Santa Fe oriented, so I would recommend the Sky Center or CCA as being great recipients of your help. But it's it's just a little plug for the website, which is really, I think, hopefully a great resource for people.
I want to mention David Gauchy's portion of the film, the Baptist portion, and the whole story about Jamie and her parents. And I was totally moved by that and how courageous he was. And also that we haven't, interestingly, the one that affected me the most was sitting at the feet of the people you most want to serve. And the Cecilia, the Black woman who's doing the people's feet, and Dr. Jim O'Connell, who's out there on the streets helping these people find their way, to come in and have their feet looked at and soaked, which is like the beginning of a way to get them into a healthcare model. And I was stunned by that. And I just want to let everyone know that I chose a clip from that section of the film. And when we end, just stay on if you want to see that section again, because we'll play that in its entirety. But anything else from Kahani and John? And it's 5:04, we could go on. I don't know, people can drop out as they need to, but anything from Anaï about what April was just saying, for instance?
I think, the way that we're all saying that you can drop into the different communities and find programs and people that are making a difference. I think that's true. As I was listening to or watching the film, I thought about Santa Fe, and I thought, what are all the little things and all the programs that we're doing, and I think that we are. I think Santa Fe, we're a small town, but and we're big at the same time, and we're different. And South Side is very different than downtown, and we've got such a variety of families and needs, and we're making a difference. Even if it's small, with one individual family, we made a difference for that family, and we have a lot of programs and a lot of people that care. And when I was a little girl, I said, I want to study in New Mexico. I want to stay here, and I want to make a difference for my community. And I'm happy to be doing that with the Sky Center and with other projects and organizations, because I think it's a really special community. So, yeah.
I have a couple more comments from the audience. Thank you, Anaï. Deborah Bolt says, you open the film with this notion that feelings are contagious. This film is a fantastic vehicle for creating good contagion around kindness. What are your plans for broadcast and distribution?
Well, the film is on Amazon Prime.
It is. Oh, yay.
And we love that. And so, tell people to post their comments, give us a rating. It'll only make that, that algorithm work harder in our favor. And so more people will get, recommend it to more people. So if you like the film, tell Amazon Prime.
Also, in addition to being on Amazon Prime, it's also still in virtual theaters and many theaters around the country. So for the person who asked about supporting the arts during this time, if you watch it through a theater, then you're helping support your local movie house too. And you can find out those theaters also on the website.
And is the film, I mean, the film should be shown, in my estimation, you know, into younger audiences.
Right. Well, we have
Used to.
ROCO is an education distribution company, and so they are actively, getting the film out to school systems. There have been school systems that have wanted to make it part of the curriculum for all the students. So we hope that the film lives on in the education setting for a long time.
Great.
And there's a wonderful discussion guide that goes along with the film to help educators. So,
Aspiring social workers should get this, should be watching this film.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
a fantastic mind, Dominic from California writes, I have done some work with at-risk youth, gang members trying to leave gangs. A big thing that has always come up is the weight of issues that falls to all young people, those with the prison of privilege and others, and all of the other young people. Does anyone have feelings about this? So the weight of issues that falls to all young people, those with the prison of privilege and all other young people. Does anyone have feelings about this? You didn't deal with gangs much in this, it seems to me, but.
I think for me, Diana, it just goes back to social connection. I mean, I know it sounds like a simplistic thing to a complex issue, but feeling a sense of I matter, I belong is so critical for young people right now. And even though there's this kind of facade sometimes of I've got 900 friends on social media, the real connection, I belong, I make an impact is so important for young people. And I think it goes back to what John was talking about is people feeling like they can make a difference, that they have talents and gifts to share. And that's really important. Yeah.
and I know you're trying to wrap it up, and Jason.
Yeah, I was just going to go ahead, John.
I just wanted to tie it to maybe just tie your mention of David Gushee and your mention of Jamie. You know, Jamie, he had a very tough series of years there when he was transitioning, and there was a suicide attempt, and it was his church and sense of inclusiveness that he felt from that church, and a Baptist church in Decatur, Georgia, of all places, that sort of just embraced Jamie. Obviously, he has an amazing family, but it went beyond the family. His church and that one Bible study class that we spent time in was incredibly important to him, and they're a big part of him being as strong as he is now, and coming out of those difficult years.
Nice.
And I have this lovely thing that Susan Todd wrote. She said, if global suffering were a pie chart, I feel overwhelmed at the thought of how do I help the people in Africa or Mexico? But if I display a simple piece of kindness and love in my tiny orb, then I made the world's suffering pie chart a tiny bit smaller. I love that.
Yeah.
So many people have written lovely things in the chat room. I hope you guys have a chance to see those. I don't exactly know how that works, but there's some really nice comments there. Well, I want to thank everyone. Oh my God, John, congratulations from the seed to the final beautiful moment, and the fact that it's on Amazon Prime and that it's going to have the kind of distribution that, I mean, I'm thrilled for you. And Kahani, I'm so happy to meet you and hear about your work. John raved about you, and clearly the two of you have a phenomenal collaboration. And I only wish
been great.
Had enough room for all of your or some of your wonderful stars in the film to come and join us. But I really wanted to have April and Anai join us because I wanted to bring it home to Santa Fe. So
thank you for inviting us, Diana. Thank you. Nice
and
to
it's
meet
wonderful.
you,
It's wonderful. Yeah, you too. It's wonderful to learn about the work you're doing at the Sky Center. Diana, I'm so honored to meet you. And Jason, thank you so much for having us and for what you're doing at your arts organization.
and support CCA during this time of COVID. It's needs just a little nudge right now. It's been very, very difficult for us to stay alive, and we've been an important part of the community, and we want to stay that way. So if you can, I mean, support the Sky Center or support whatever you can. Just little acts of kindness, remember. And we're going to play now, Jason.
Yeah, and I just want to wrap up by saying thank you also, and thank you, Diana, for leading another lovely, deep conversation. I really encourage everybody to watch this film and to send it to your friends. It's a film that really can make a difference. And I watch a lot of movies, and this movie really moved me deeply, and I'm gonna share it along. Our next program in the living room is Friday night, and it's a film that resonates actually with the story of the Antidote. It's our Lost Classics Council, which is Joan Tewksbury, Paul Barnes, and Mara Fortes. They're going to be talking about the great Italian neo-realist film Umberto D. Again, it's free. You get to watch this movie for free, and it is one of the great classics. Ingmar Bergman's favorite film of all time. So sign up at the CCA website. And Diana, we'll leave everybody with this final beautiful, beautiful clip. So get your tissues out. It's really moving. Thank you everyone who participated. And we'll see you back in the living room Friday or beyond. Be well, be safe.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
I still think you had a little bit of a concussion when you fell down, and I'd rather have you in, Bobby, okay?
If you're trained in medicine, there is no career path to take care of homeless people.
And you don't need detox, right?
It was a nurse who said, "You've been trained all wrong." And she took away all the tools of my trade. And she said, what we do is we tend to invite people in to soak their feet. And she said, so I'm gonna have you soak feet.
Remember, Food Care Clinic is a gateway into primary care. And not because we would just want to disturb people and just bother with vital signs, but it gives us an indication as to somebody's health condition. Does it make sense? All right.
What's your name?
Walter Bozar.
Any allergies? What happened to this foot?
It's a long story. It's a gangrene, though. It's a dry gangrene. No fall off your bed.
My feet are soaking wet. Oh, walking in the rain.
How are you today? Do you have any allergies? Have you had a vaccine?
Let's see what's going on here. Ooh. Did you see that this is really rough, Eric? You feel my thumb there? Yeah. How about here?
Can we just take a look at the rest of this?
Oh, I can do this.
Any pain down here?
No.
Look at the base of the second toe, where his thumb is.
A little bit.
Yeah. Let me see.
Oh, this?
I don't know why it's coming.
Oh, that?
My feet were wet for a whole
That's
week.
what
I
it
walked
shows.
around wet sneakers for a week.
Oh no, that's
Yeah.
bad news.
Oh, thank
So
you.
tell me, how's that? Little more?
Yeah.
Okay.
A hundred better.
Okay.
A hundred better.
I was given this opportunity in America to go to school and then get my education in line. So I knew deep inside me that I need to give back to this community that has supported me. Where is my friend?
How are you, darling?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah?
You do such a good job. You take too good care of me. You really do.
Thank you. The mayor is here. The mayor is here. Good morning, Mayor.
Most homeless people don't hear somebody mention their name with dignity for weeks, sometimes, if not months.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The nurses are brilliant with this because it flips the power structure, so you're at the feet of the person you're trying to serve.
These people are human beings like you and me, and they also have fallen into bad times and ended up being homeless. What can we do to help them? Can you please allow me to get a blood pressure on you?
When you try,
Oh, thank
didn't
you so
work
much.
last time.
Thank you.
It's gonna be through the roof because I don't have my medication.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm upset with this. My blood pressure's high. You can just tell her it's high. It's always high. I haven't had my meds in a week.
All right. Okay. This is really
Yeah,
high.
there's nothing to worry about. It's been like that forever.
What can I do? Just
Nothing. There's nothing you can do. What are you gonna do?
I can call that doctor up
Yeah, what's that gonna
and
do?
make you appointment to see him ASAP as soon as
Rothberg?
possible. Yes.
And what is that gonna do?
It's gonna at least increase your blood pressure medication.
Yeah, if you want to try, you can try calling and.
No, I will do it now.
God bless you guys. Awesome.
Can you get him appointment with Dr. Rothberg at Pine? Why? Why in America? Why will people be still sleeping on the street? What can we do to bring all those people every night on the street into a house so they wouldn't experience snow on them, rain, even heat of the sun? Some will come in and they look exhausted. So I give them a glass of water, check their vital signs. Some I will see medical issues. I have to send them out to the hospital. So you treat people with kindness will make them to open up and you will see more.
Sir, do you have gloves?
No. You can earn people's trust, but be present. Sometimes it happens on the first day, sometimes it happens after 6 months, but the persistence and the continuity is what really works. And when you can do that, then you can start to deliver healthcare. If you don't take the time to do that, you can't.
Skin looks good. This hurt? There's an aspect to my comfort zone that I've completely demolished and expanded. Just coming here, working with feet. At first, it was hard to get used to, and now, you know, it's just an aspect of humans.
Do you mind if I take your blood vitals?
Everyone in here who's walking behind me, this is their job, and they're everywhere. They're all over the country, all over the world, you know, helping people, taking some small effort to provide and try to, you know, equal the playing field in an unfair world.
In 1 year, I've come from absolutely nothing, a stuttering mess downstairs. With the help of the staff and everybody else, I've come up 1 complete year to having my feet fixed, my hip replaced. I got a smile, you know, I got my headlights on now, you know what I mean? So I'm a complete new vehicle thanks to this place. And that's the reason why I am where I am today.
And thanks to yourself.
Yeah.
When I look at the long vision, my guess is